So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these perfect but simple mitts. Now, the mitt I'm showing you today is the basic blank mitt like what you see here. However, there's lots of things you can do with this mitt. The type of fabric and stitch I'll be showing you today lends itself beautifully to such embellishments as cross stitching or embroidery. In this case, what I've done is I've taken this lace motif owl, and I'll have the link to the tutorial on how to make this owl if you're interested in the description box below. And I put this on the mitt. You can see how I changed colors to give the mitt a little more interest, because it's so simple that it just lends itself to whatever your imagination allows for. Also, you can see where I've made this Celtic knot piece. And if I wanted to, I can make it more defined, more pronounced by sewing it onto my mitt. And I would just, in this case, if I were to sew this onto my mitt, I would simply stitch right here on the inside of this edge of these top loops right here on the edge of the piece, right? And that'll give it a nice defined look. But here, as you can see, what I did was I stitched it onto my mitt, back loop only, which gives it more of an embossed or cable look. Now, this stitch right here, as I mentioned in the description, this particular mitt is pretty much made with 2 stitches, a single crochet and also a simple Tunisian stitch, or better known as the Tunisian Simple Stitch or an Afghan Stitch. Now, I strongly suggest that if you're thinking right now that that is way too difficult, way too advanced for you, believe me, it isn't. It's the simplest thing ever. It's not much more difficult than doing a basic single crochet. So I invite you to watch the video and then decide for yourself. Folks, for today's project, I'm going to need a few things. I'm going to need a yarn needle. I'm going to need a pair of scissors. I'm going to need 2 types of hooks. Now, both these hooks are going to be the same size. I need a standard crochet hook, that's a size E, 3.5 millimeters. And then also an Afghan hook, size 3.5 or E as well. Next, I'm going to need my yarn. Now, for these mittens, I'm using a worsted 4-weight yarn. This is a Mary Maxim. It's their natural alpaca. Now, while it would be wonderful if it was 100% alpaca, this is kind of a more affordable version, and it is a blend. So basically the blend is about 20% alpaca, so it really does still give you a nice soft yarn. And it's blended with about 77% acrylic and 30% viscose. Now, you can use any yarn that you like for these. Just because they're mitts, I would strongly suggest you use as natural fiber as possible. Like if you're going to be wearing them in snow, I would suggest you might want to go with something that's wool or maybe 100% alpaca. This particular yarn I just think is a lovely color, and it's what I happen to have on hand. You can use whatever worsted or weight yarn you have. It's going to work just fine as well. Let me start off by giving a warm welcome. And for those of you who aren't in the know, my name is Sig. I'm a retired tattoo artist of about 20 years or so, turned fiber artist and passionate crocheter. And here on my channel is where you and I create a little magic with every knot. So don't forget to hit the subscribe and like buttons. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it helps me to provide you with weekly tutorials. Because I'm always interested in your feedback, feel free to leave your comments and questions below. I really do try my best to get back to everybody when a question or a comment is made. So now, with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's get started. Now, to begin with, I want to chain 40. Now, 40 is going to be a size woman's medium because these mitts are basically unisex. The female medium is, or woman's medium, is going to be typically a man's size small. Now, if I'm making a woman's small, I'm going to chain 35. If I'm making a woman's large, which would then also be the equivalent to a man's medium, I'm going to chain 45. So I'm going to start by chaining 40. One, two. Okay, so now I have 40 chains. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Tunisian crochet, this is just a simple Tunisian stitch. Not going to switch anything up on you. And so the way I'm going to proceed with this is each row that I do is going to be broken into part A and part B. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. So as I begin, I want to take my hook and I want to insert it into the second chain from my hook. And then I'm going to go and yarn over and I'm going to pull that yarn through. And then I'm going to go and insert my hook into the next chain. I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to pull my hook through, or rather pull that yarn through. So now I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to continue doing this for the length of my chain. And when I've completed that, I should have 40 loops on my hook because I am crocheting a medium. Now, if you're doing a small, you should have 35. If you're doing a large, you should have 45. And I'm going to finish doing this. And then when I come back, I'll show you how to do part B of row 1. So now that I have 40 loops on my hook, 1 for each chain, I'm going to proceed with part B of row 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over and then I'm going to pull that yarn through 1 loop. And then after that, I'm yarn over, I'm going to pull that through 2 loops. Yarn over and I'm going to pull it through 2 loops again. I'm going to continue pulling it through 2 loops for the rest of the length of this row 1. And once I've completed doing that all the way through, my work's going to look like this. And then that'll be the completion of row 1. And I'm going to move on to row 2. And part A of row 2 is, again, I already have my first loop on my hook. So I can skip this vertical bar and I'm going to go to the next vertical bar. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull my yarn through. And then I'm going to insert my hook underneath the next vertical bar and yarn over and pull my yarn through. Again, I'm going to insert my hook into the next bar, yarn over and pull my yarn through. I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of the length of my work. At least for row 2, part A. Now, once row 2, part A is completed, I'm going to do just like what I did for part B in row 1. I'm going to begin with a yarn over and I'm going to pull that yarn through the first loop. And then yarn over and I'm going to pull that yarn through the next 2 loops. And I'm going to continue pulling my yarn over through the next 2 loops until I've completed the length of my piece. So now that I've completed row 2 completely, my work looks like this. Now I'm going to repeat row 2, part A and part B from rows 3 to rows 12. This is for the medium size. For the large size, you are going to, for rows 3 through 14, you're going to repeat row 2, A and B. And then for the small size, from rows 3 to 10, you're going to repeat row 2, part A and part B. And now when I've completed my 12th row, I will come right back here to explain to you what it is I do next. So now I've completed my first 12 rows. And this is for a size medium. Now, if you're making small gloves, you will have completed 10 rows at this point. And if you are making large mittens, you will have completed 14 rows. Now, the next step is this next row, we're going to start working on the thumb hole. So if you are making a small, go ahead and get 14 loops on your hook. Since I'm doing a medium, I will put 16 loops on my hook. And if you are making a large, you will put 18 loops on your hook. 1, 2. So now that I have 16 loops on my hook, I'm going to slip stitch 8. Now, if you're doing a small, you're going to want to slip stitch 7. And if you're doing a large, you're going to want to slip stitch 9. Now, how I do this is I'm going to still be working in these vertical bars. I'm going to take my hook. I'm going to slip it into that first bar, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to insert it into the next bar, yarn over. I'm going to pull up that loop, but then I'm going to pull it all the way through to that first stitch. And again, I'm going to insert my hook into the bar. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to pull that loop all the way through, and that creates my next slip stitch. And I'm going to do this for 8 stitches. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I should have 16 left. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 left. If you're doing a small, you should, of course, have 14 left. And if you're doing a large, you should have 18 left. So go ahead and get loops on your next. So far, my work looks like this, and yours should look something similar. Now, just as before, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loop over and pull my yarn through, just as I've done part B on all my other rows, until I hit this 16th loop. And then I'll show you what to do next. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, once I've gotten back this far, I am going to chain 5. Now, if you're making a small, you're going to chain 4. And if you're making a large, you're going to chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to bring my work back down here, and I'm going to pick up just like before. Yarn over, pull through the 2 stitches, the 2 loops. yarn over, pull through the 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops until I've completed this row part B. So you can see this is where the thumb is going to fit. And next we're going to go ahead and draw up our loops all the way across for our next row. And just as we did with our first row of chain, we're going to pull up loops through each one of the chains on the top part of the hole for our thumb. And then of course I'm going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 more makes 6. And then I'm going to continue taking up loops for my next vertical bars. So now, just as before, yarn over, pull through the first loop, and then again yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops all the way down to complete. Well, for me, this is going to be completing my row 14. So if you're working on a large, this completion of this row will mean that you have completed your row 16. And if you're working on a small, this will be completion of your row 12. So next, I'm going to go back to repeating row 2, part A and part B for several more rows. So for a size medium, for the next 15 to 39 rows, I'm going to repeat rows 2, part A and part B. For a small, for the next 13 through 36 rows, I'm going to repeat rows 2, part A and part B. And then for the large size, rows 17 through 42, I'm also going to repeat rows 2, part A and part B. And I'll see you right back here when I've completed doing just that. So now, once you've completed all the rows that you need to complete, and your work will look something like this, the next 3 rows are going to pretty much be exactly the same for each size. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to start to decrease a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and of course skip that first vertical bar, and then I'm going to insert my hook into the next 2 bars together, and I'm going to pull through my loop. Right, again, and then so the next stitch I'm going to just do a regular Tunisian Simple Stitch, yarn over and pull my loop through. Next, I'm going to insert my hook into 2 vertical bars, yarn over and pull my loop through. And then the next is just going to be a single vertical bar, yarn over, pull my loop through. So I'm going to continue just that way, alternating 2 with 1. And when I do my return pass, I'm going to do it just like I would normally do a return pass on any of the other rows, except for the thumb row that we worked on. And then the second row, we're going to work the same way. So this first row and the second row, we're going to be alternating between decreases and regular stitches, decreases and regular stitches. And then in our last row, I'll tell you what to do there once we finished the next 2 rows. So now that I've completed my 2 rows where I've done my decrease alternate with a regular Tunisian Simple Stitch, I'm going to do 1 more row. And that's just going to be basically just the standard Tunisian Simple Stitch all the way across. And then once I've finished that row, did my regular return pass, then I'm going to fasten off my yarn, and I'm going to leave a nice long tail, like 18 inches or so maybe, because this is what I'm going to use to sew the top part and down the side of the seam of the mitt. But we won't actually do that until after we've completed the thumb. Now for the thumb, I'm going to switch over to my regular sized hook. You may decide to continue to use your long hook on this one, but the thumb gets a little finagly. So I'm going to use this because I find it's easier for me to work the thumb because I don't have so many stitches that I have to do. Now for the thumb, basically this is where we start to figure out which side of your mitt this is going to be, whether this is going to be the right hand mitt or the left hand mitt. So for me, it's going to be the right hand mitt. So I'm going to want it to sit like this. So I'm going to flip my work this way because this is the side that I want the seam for my thumb to fit. All right. So basically my mitt is going to look like this. Now, if this is your left hand mitt, you're going to have the seam facing on the opposite side. All right, so this is where you decide which mitt this is going to be, right hand or left hand. If this is going to be my left hand mitt, I am going to start right here at this vertical bar, right here at the corner of my opening, here at this lower corner. Now, if I'm going to do the right hand mitt, which I'm going to do for this one, I am going to start at the vertical bar right here at the opening, but on the top part of the thumb opening. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to anchor in my yarn, just like so. And then for each stitch all the way around, each vertical bar all the way around, I'm going to go and I'm going to pick up a loop. Just like I normally would. You see, just like so. Now I happen to be weaving in my last bit of tail here as I work. You don't have to do that if that's going to get in your way. You can just weave it in later with a needle. Okay, so now this is where we start getting a little finagly, because now I've got to make this turn and I'm going to start working on my stitches going around. Just make sure that you're picking up your stitches via the appropriate vertical bars. Because when you start getting twisty like this, it can sometimes be easy to grab the wrong vertical bar. Now, if you find it easier to use the longer hook, by all means use your longer hook. But you can see kind of where this gets a little fiddly as we swing around to get those last couple of stitches. Just take your time. So now once you've managed to get all of your stitches all the way around, you can see it's a little It's a little tight in there and it's a little tricky. Once you do this, it's much easier once you get your fabric started. But when you get it started, it really is a little fiddly, and that's just the way this goes. If you're trying to get your thumb to be like one piece of fabric with the rest of your fabric. However, if there's easier ways of doing this, drop a comment in the box below, and we can all learn something new. And just as before, we're going to yarn over and going to pull it through that first loop. Now take your time so you don't end up doing a decrease by accident, and yarn over or pulling it through too many loops, and then pull it through the 2 loops, and then just continue your return pass as you normally would. Just like so, and then until you get all the way around again. Also, too, keep in mind, if you're using one of the Afghan hooks that are about normal size, but then they have like a long kind of like plastic or string tail, kind of, in lieu of the length of a regular metal piece, that would make this a lot easier too if you had one of those. And make it easier to get around that corner. Okay, so you can see that now we've got the thumb started. And it goes all the way around. Okay, so this will be counted as the first row of the thumb. Now, if you are making a small mitt, you're going to want to do 6 rows of just straight Tunisian Simple Stitch and return passes. If you are doing a medium, you're going to want to do 8 rows of the Tunisian Simple Stitch and return passes. And if you're doing a large glove, you're going to want to do 10 rows of the regular Tunisian Simple Stitch and return passes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do or complete my 8 rows. The amount of rows you need to complete may be different. And then I'm going to come back and show you what to do after that. So yeah, I just switched back over to my long hook because I think it might be easier for you to see. But you can see I've completed my 8 rows. And now the next 3 rows are going to be just like the way we finished off the top of our mitt. So the next 2 rows, we're going to do the alternate of a decrease and then the regular Tunisian Simple Stitch. Decrease and regular Tunisian Simple Stitch. And then that last row is just going to be simple Tunisian Simple Stitch all the way through. So we'll start, where of course you're going to skip your first bar, and then you're going to decrease and then do a regular stitch, and then going to do another decrease and then a regular stitch. And then of course the return pass is going to be just like you've done before. Nothing new there. And I'm going to do just this for the next 2 rows. And now I have one more row to do. And the last row is just going to be, as I mentioned before, just that simple Tunisian stitch. And then when I've completed this row, I'm going to cut myself off a tail that's long enough to sew with. All right, so now it's time to sew our mitten closed. So you can see I've already done the top part of the hand of the mitt and down the side seam. Now, the reason why I jumped ahead is because all I really do is need to show you how to sew up the thumb and the seam of the thumb, because that's exactly how you're going to sew together the top part of your mitt and the seam down the side of the mitt. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to come and you're just going to take your needle and you're going to come around to the other side, and we're going to be working pretty much in those back loops. And I'm going to come up in the next loop, in that back loop, and I'm going to pull that tight. And then again, I'm going to come up from the bottom into the next back loop, and then I'm going to pull that snug. And I'm going to continue to do that for pretty much each stitch all the way around. And then I come up in that back loop, and I'm going to pull tight. Come up in the back loop again. I'm going to pull snug, and then come up in this back loop here, and I'm going to pull snug. And so now me, because I am who I am, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just run my yarn through one more time just to make sure that that seam stays snug. And now I'm going to sew down the seam. So with this Tunisian stitch, you can see how this side, you can see pretty much the V's in this side. And then on this side of the fabric, it's pretty much just this single line of stitches. So how I handle this is I come back here, and so right underneath this vertical bar, we're going to see the stitch right here that runs horizontally. So what I want to do is I want to go to where the vertical bar is. I want to sit behind that vertical bar, and I want to insert my hook right into those two stitches that sit horizontally. And I'm going to pull that shut, and then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to insert it in between the V's right there on the inside. And then I'm going to go to the next stitch down, and I'm going to come right here underneath this vertical bar, and I'm going to insert my hook where the stitches run horizontally. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to insert it back into the one V, and then I'm going to come out the other V. And this is how I'm going to sew my seam. What this does is it pretty much hides your seam. It hides the yarn you've used to sew your seam with. And it does a really good job making that seam look like just another row of stitches. So it blends in very nicely. Now I'm going to finish this up, and then when I come back, I'm going to just give you a quick review on how to crochet the cuff for my mitt, for your mitt, for whoever mitt you are making this for. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a cuff to my mitt. And my mitt's a simple mitt, and so my cuff is going to be just a basic simple cuff as well. And each of the spaces between each of these vertical lines is going to be a stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert my hook right in here. And I'm going to tie in. And then I'm going to go ahead and chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And by the way, this cuff is going to be the cuff you do for all your mitts, regardless of the size. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain, and I'm going to single crochet. I'm going to single crochet 4 more times. And that'll give me a total of 5 single crochets. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch over. And then I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch over from that. And then I'm going to turn my work. And the last 2 single crochets I just did, I'm going to ignore those. I'm going to skip them. And I'm going to single crochet back loop only into that third single crochet from my hook. So 1, and then I'm going to do that 4 more times. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to turn my work. And again, I'm going to single crochet in the second stitch from my hook. That'll be basically the first single crochet that I hit, but I'm only going to work back loops only for the remainder of the cuff. So all the other stitches in terms of this cuff are going to be done back loop only in terms of the ribbing. So that's 1, and then 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So you can kind of start seeing the ribbing sort of taking shape. It'll be a couple of more rows and then you'll really see the ribbing pop out. So then I'm going to go to the next stitch over from the last one that I worked, and I'm going to single crochet. And then I'm going to single crochet in the stitch over from that. And I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to skip the last 2 single crochets I just made. And then I'm going to single crochet in the back loop only of the remaining single crochets. So that'll be 5 single crochets. So that's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to turn my work again. And I'm going to work back down that rib. Again, I'm going to do this one more time for you to see. I'm going to insert my hook into the first single crochet. And I'm going to work back loops only. So that'll be 1, and 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then again, I'm going to single crochet in the next stitch over from the last single crochet that I made in the wrist area of the fabric of this mitt itself. And then I'm going to go 1 more stitch over. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to start that process all over again. I'm going to pretty much repeat this all the way around. And as you can see, I'm now starting to get my ribbing. And then once that's all finished, you're going to have a ribbing that looks like this. And then you bring it all the way around, and then you're just going to just overlap the one side of your ribbing over the other side and just sew that seam and then weave in your end. And your mitt will be complete. Or, I mean, that's if you just want your mitt to just be a basic mitt blank, if you will. And this, of course, will lend itself to all sorts of embellishments or design elements that you might like to add to it. So pretty much like what I did with this mitt, right? So as you can see, I went in, as mentioned before, I just used a different color because quite frankly, I wasn't sure I was going to have enough of this yarn because I only had the 1 skein. And the skein itself was about 3.5 ounces of yarn. And so I just didn't think that I was going to have quite enough to do 2 large mitts with this. So I added a little decorative element, if you like, and I just changed up some color. And I added a different color to kind of create an element. But here you can see, so I made the mitt look different like that. And then I also added the owl motif to give it a little personality. And then again, as mentioned before, I could embroider on this because the fabric is gridded out so beautifully, or I could easily do a cross stitch in each one of these blocks. It gives me a great visual from which to work. There's so many different things I could do with this. But now's the time for me to say goodbye. So I just want to make sure that you know how much I enjoyed our time together and how I look forward to seeing you again. So until next time, stay crafty, stay amazing. Bye-bye now. Have a great week.